What's up, everyone? Welcome to ClearTalk. So, in this video, we're going to be talking about the election results. And while that might seem okay, we're way past that now. Why are we talking about this? What I wanted to do was actually for one, I wanted to wait until pretty much it's secluded as to all the votes are in, or all the votes that possibly could be tallied, I guess, at this point, are in, so that I would have the most accurate numbers, to try to do this data uh, compilation or whatever. What I wanted to do was talk about and reveal the actual reality of voting in the United States, like the percentage of people who vote versus percentage of people who don't vote versus percentage of people who are actually registered to vote, the eligibility versus registered versus how many actually votes, and kind of really take a deep dive look at that. Because for me, it's something that's always overlooked. It's the people that don't vote are never really considered, in my opinion, in the election results. And it tends to skew people's opinions or thoughts about you know how much, or good or bad a person won, or whatever the case. And also gives this sort of sense, Trump has been arguing that he has a mandate, that he got a mandate in this election. And that's really just uh, sort of rough off of like the fact that they did win very narrowly, but did win, across the board as far as the presidency, Senate, House, you know. But he also argued that his mandate, just himself, that he was a mandate just in the presidency itself, and that's not necessarily accurate. So I wanted to kind of break that down. I've done the percentages. I've done this research as much as I could to try to find numbers to use in this. Uh, the best that I could find results of, and I broke down the percentages and put them into a file to show you and display. So um, that's what we're going to do today in this video. So thank you very much for joining. If you like what we're doing here, if I'm what I'm doing here, please consider subscribing, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. If you would, check out my other channels and stuff if you like. JMD Drummer, JMD Play. Subscribe to those as well if you would. It'd be very much appreciated. The Discord there, one-time donations, or up at the top there, JMD Nation Patreon, $3 a month. Any kind of support you give, again, is very much appreciated, and I thank you very much. So, we're gonna swap over here. Honestly, I've already started this video once and got like 5 minutes in and realized that I didn't flip over. Like, I selected this, but I didn't double click it for it to actually appear on the in the video recording. All right. What we're going to first do is break down just the basics that you see and is shown. Um, so this is the results as of right now, which is pretty much everything that's in for the most part, or everything that's going to be counted, I think, is pretty much counted. Everybody's at basically 99%. That's the most they ever really go. They don't ever go to 100% because it just, the obscurity of some votes that don't wind up getting counted, or, that are pulled out, or whatever the case. Everybody just winds up at 99%. Fine, no big deal. So we have Donald Trump at 77. And this might be hard. Not that wrong thing. Um, I don't know if I can see here. We try to. Oh, anyway, whatever. 77,269. Okay. Um, and Harris is at 74,983, right close to 75 million. I mean, within 10,000 votes. Even on my phone a minute ago, it actually showed her at 74,999 something. So I don't know why there's a difference in those results or how they're being showed. This is Bing versus, I think, Google. Um, And that might be the difference. I don't know. Google might be showing slightly different vote counts, whatever. Roughly within 10,000 of 75 million. So, and then the other candidates, I added them up, and they're roughly around 2.5 million that voted for anybody other than Trump or Harris, whether it be Jill Stein or whatever. Um, so now, first off, I want to do just a comparison between 2024 and 2020. Okay, so I have the election for 2020 also up. So as you see, now the difference, let's just say, let's just do a party split to begin with. 81 million Biden in 2020 versus 74, right at 75 million for Harris in 2024. So yes, there's a loss there of 6 million votes, right? Who those 6 million votes are, who knows? Why they did, if they didn't vote, or whether they voted instead for Trump or something possible. The difference here for Trump is 74 million versus 77 million. So there's a 3 million difference, and almost exactly 3 million difference between 2024 and 2020. So you could argue that 3 million could have come from the Democrats, possibly, or it could be newly registered Republicans. There was quite a few of those. I want to say roughly somewhere around 6 million, I think 6-7 million that were newly registered this year on Republicans. It was about I want to say somewhere around 11 or 12 million that were newly registered Democrats. So they're you can, most of the time, newly registered certainly is more than likely to vote than those who have been registered. So part of Harris's gain there could have been from new, so that means he actually may have lost even more than 6 million. But same could argue for Trump, that his 3 million is taken up in new voters. It could have lost a couple of million voters from 2020, but then gained new voters plus any voters that switched from the Democratic Party. There's a lots of nuance here. It's not that, it's not all black and white a lot of times. It's just, there's a lot of nuance bouncing back and forth. Granted, you have to also think about people that may have passed away, things like that. There's a lot of nuance in these numbers when you're trying to reflect on year to year, or whatever. One other thing I want to point out is that there's a lot of argument that Kamala did horrible in this. Like, me personally, I thought she was going to do better. I thought she was going to do better than I clearly thought she was going to beat Trump pretty cleanly, but I was wrong in that. But there's an argument that she just did horrible and that it was just a terrible election for Democrats and for her specifically. But when you really look at it, she did almost 75 million, 74.99, whatever the case is. Trump only did 70, just barely over 74 in 2020. So she technically did better than Trump did in 2020. So unless you're trying to argue that Trump did horrible in 2020, which, you could argue that, but he himself argues that he, in 2020, he had the most votes ever in Republican, history. And oftentimes arguing that is in period because he didn't agree with, Biden actually having 81. He didn't think that was real. He thought that those were fake numbers. But regardless, but I'm just pointing out that, Harris did not do that bad. The percentage here, we're looking at 49.9% versus 48.4%. There's only a 1.5% difference between them. You're talking about roughly maybe 2-3 million people. That's literally is what we're talking about. 2 million, a little over 2 million people. So this is not, it's not. It was a lot closer than people are making it out to be. And the fact that just on Trump's argument of having a mandate in himself, 49.9% is not a mandate. It's not more than half of the people that voted. So that's technically, even on those standards, it's not a mandate. Now you could say it's close enough. Fine, okay, we'll say it's close enough. But when I start breaking down the rest of the numbers, you'll see that maybe it's not what you think it is. So, in starting in to start off, before I go to my little Word document that I've got everything listed out, what I want to point out is that oftentimes when you look at these numbers, like this setup right here, we look at that as if these are the amount of people that voted, like almost as if it's the most, like this, it's all the people that could vote. And what I'm going to show you is that that's clearly not, that's like so badly thought, like an opinion, that, I mean, it just flips everything around. So when and it's oftentimes like presented to us this way, that it is like, yes, he got 49.9%, and that's like 49.9% of the nation, like he almost had 50% of the nation. And we look at it as a whole, like the country as a whole, and that this pride that everybody would go vote, and or everybody who cared to go vote would go vote. Everybody that's registered to vote would go vote, but that's not really the case either. So, and I think that sometimes we just get skewed mentally when we look at these numbers, thinking, like I said, is that's just like the whole of everybody that can vote, and that's just not the case. So, we swap over here, and we'll kind of point this out and show this to y'all. Let me. Should have already did this. Layout. View. Yeah. Percentage. Zoom. Okay. 200 maybe? That's probably too much. Okay. We'll work with that. All right. So, what I did here was I broke down all the numbers for eligible voters, and then versus registered voters. And I made some some of this that I plugged in was just completely estimated, completely like theorized number, or just sort of a loosely number that I felt is reasonably arguable. So now the difference between eligible and registered. Eligible is everybody in the country who is eligible to be a voter based on age and your nationalism or whatever, that you I don't know the word I'm trying to go for here, but someone who is actually eligible, someone who's an actual citizen, okay, legal citizen. So age and legal citizen of the United States, that's an eligible voter. But then you have registered voters. That's people that are eligible that actually have went and registered to vote. Okay, that's the difference. So pretty simple, not hard to understand. And what I did is, okay, so you had roughly in 2024 estimate 245 million eligible voters. Okay, that's the number that I found when trying to research this stuff. And that was pretty much the few sources that I was able to get this kind of number from. That's pretty much what they all are, argued. About 245 million eligible voters, people who could vote if they wanted to in the nation. Okay. Now, the actual number of people who voted was approximately 155 million. Okay. So that's that actually voted in this election. So that would leave you with 89 million eligible non-voters. So there was 89 million people who were eligible to vote that did not vote. All right. So even just looking at that, I broke down percentage for eligibility and percentage to registered voters. Now, what I did here, and I'm going to skip real quick to the registered voters part. So since we have eligible, we have non-voting eligible, or the amount of voting eligible versus the non-voting eligible. Registered voters, unfortunately, and when understanding or when getting this data, it's oftentimes way after the fact that they have, went through and calculated up, because, you have people that in some states that are able to register up almost to the time of election. So to try to really gauge and get all that data as far as who is registered or not takes a little bit of time before somebody will take the time to actually do that. And they've got to do that state by state and all that kind of stuff. So the only number we technically have is 2022. There was roughly 161 million registered voters. Okay. So that is 66% of eligible voters. All right. That were actually registered in 2022. Now, the best number that I could find, and who may have newly registered in 2024, was 18 million. It was right around 18 million, 17 point something million. And that was a few days or maybe a week or so before, or some period before the election. So I sort of gave that there could have been a couple more thousand or something who may have registered up to the date or up to the, time of cutoff for the last person that could possibly register in the country. So roughly around 18 million is what I'm putting in newly registered voters. Okay. So if you were to just say 2022 strict 161, you add 18 million to that, you get 179 million. Okay. 179 million that you could, that possible, like the max probably possible that could be registered to vote. Okay. But that's not including, like I said, people who may have passed away between the registration numbers that were figured up from 22 versus, now, and, or, just people who were purged, which, I was trying to think more on the lines of those that were purged from the voter rolls, that were purged because they were passed away, they were dead, versus those that were purged just because they hadn't voted in a while or something like that. Like, that kind of sucks. Now, granted, that does in some degree also add into this, so you can kind of, and that's the reason why what I made my argument on the registered voter numbers that I'm going to show you is based within a frame of 22 minimal 161 versus the maximum estimated for 2024, which is the 179. I gave a range of possible registered voters. And what I did was I just split that difference. So the main number that I give is just a split difference between those ranges, which is 170 million registered voters, which would be 69% of eligible voters, 69% of the 245 million. All right. So I just wanted to be completely disclaimer and be completely transparent on where I put these numbers and how I came up with these numbers and the percentages, so that I'm not trying to mislead you in any kind of way. The 170 is a complete guess. Okay, but it's just my best guess argument for the possible number that could be registered, which is not known right now. So, like I said, I'm just splitting the difference, but I'm also giving you the range percentage between that smallest number and largest number. So with that out of the way, all right, we're going back up to these numbers here. So, take a breath. All right. So what we have is what I come up with for registered non-voters, so people who were registered to vote, but still did not potentially get out and vote. And this is based in the 170 mark. So out of the 155 million that voted, there's 170 million that I'm arguing, estimate, guess, that were registered. Okay. That leaves you with 15 million. Okay. That were registered non voters. Okay. So this 15 million is out of this 89 million that is eligible. All right. Which is, I give here, this is 0.6% of the eligible voters. All right. And then when looking at registered voters, this would be 0.88% of registered voters, or a range of 0.8 to 0.9%. All right. That's people who, like I said, could have voted, they were registered, but they, for some reason, did not vote. All right. That's what I'm saying. So now looking at Trump, he had 77 million. This percentage for eligible voters, okay, his percentage for eligible voters, so 77 million out of the 245 that were eligible, that is 31.5% for all eligible voters. So when you look at this, of all people who could possibly vote in the nation, Trump only received 31.5% of that, okay? And the people who were actually registered, and again, this is taken from the 170, that's 45%. So when you look at which, is seen on this, you're looking at 49%, but that's literally the percentage of people who actually voted. Where we're looking at here is percentage of people who could have voted that were actually registered, but taking out that 15 million that didn't. He had 45%, or in range 43 to 48% if the registered, and that would be if this percentage would be at the low version, like if there was only 161 registered voters, he would have a 48%. If there was 179 million at the high range, it would be 43%. All right, so that's where those difference in numbers come from. This would be the high number, this would be the low number, as far as registered voters. 75 million for Harris, that's 30.5% of eligible voters, or 44% of registered voters, and the range is 42% to 47%. And then, of course, the others who voted for anybody else, 2.5 million, that's 0.1% of eligible voters, or 0.147. And the reason why I gave this is because of this number. The range puts you at 1% to, 0.1% to 0.2%. So I actually gave the kind of this way more numbers than this, but that was the most accurate number I could kind of give to say, hey, between the 1.1 and 0.2, this 1.47, okay? Which, if you rounded it up, would make that 1.5. You could argue that's 0.5% if you're wanting to round, but that's almost dead middle, so whatever. So yes, what you can see here is that if you're just looking at the nation as a whole, okay, those who could vote, but, anybody that could possibly vote, your non-voters, which is 89 million people who did not vote, is 37%. So people who did not vote, whether they're registered or not registered, is greater than those who voted for either Trump or Harris. As you can see, 37% to 31%, 30%, 31.5%, 30.5%. So this shows you just how many people is not even either did not vote, which we know were registered, 15 million of that, but or either just have no concern in voting. Maybe they have no concern at all in who is president or not, or maybe they feel like it doesn't matter if they vote or not. There's a lot of nuance that could go into someone deciding to not register to vote and not vote at all. Like there's, whether they care at all, they're just not um, or whatever the case. There could be a lot of different reasons why somebody decides not to vote, not to even register, if that. Um, so that's a lot of voters. Now one could argue that, okay, well, that's fine, but the 170 is the only percentage of people who even care at all. So that's the only ones that matter. Like that would be like that's an argument that someone would say that, well, we don't care about this eligible voter, or we don't care about these eligible non-voters, because this is the only number that we are concerned about. Like, this is all that matters, because these are the only people that care about any of this. Let's just say that's what they're going to argue. Okay, well, if that's the case, still, Trump got 45% and Harris got 44%. So there's still a 1% of population who did not vote for them, and yeah, there's 1% of population that were registered that did not vote for them. So I'm still trying to say that what I'm trying to say is that this is not a mandate. You for one, it's less than half of the population, and secondly, it's only 1% more than the other person. So even at half of the less than percentage of the nation, you're still, that's not a mandate. A mandate would be more like you have almost 2/3. Like they tried to say a supermajority, or whatever, when it comes to the House or Senate or something like that. For me, a mandate would be like 2/3, or even like 60%. I would say probably could be argued as a mandate. 45% is not a mandate, especially when you're only 1% over the other candidate, the other major candidate, anyways. But even so, like I said, when you look at eligible voters, it's only 31 and a half. And this is where I'm talking about. This is the concern, or this is the what's crazy is that there are more people who, for whatever reason, don't even care about voting or don't care about the elections. And like I said, it could be for multiple reasons. Maybe they don't think it matters. Maybe they don't think their vote matters. Maybe they just don't care. Maybe they don't know at all. I mean, who knows the mentality or the notion that they are taking to not register. And this is the interesting thing, that you have roughly only 63% of people in the country, only 63% that care or are interested in who is running our country, who is making decisions, who is creating laws, creating policies, affecting our way of life. There's only 63% of eligible voters that care. And that is, for me, concerning. Now, granted, like I said, people would argue, okay, well, yeah, but there's 91% of actual registered voters who went and voted. So that's 90% of the people that we consider that care that actually went and voted. And that's pretty good. That's what a lot of people would argue. But my saying is, this for me is the most concerning. That there are so many people checked out or don't care, or whether they genuinely don't care or they feel like they're not cared about. That's the issue. And that just shows how polarized. We always talk about the polarization between the parties here, but this is what's polarized in the nation for me, as far as who is politically desirable or desired to be in the political scene or political school of thought. and what drives the, like I said, your everyday life in this country, uh, and everything that affects you. So that's I just wanted to break that down for everybody, and give you a little bit deeper understanding, or clarification on the fact that there is a large part of this country that for whatever reason doesn't vote. And this gets even crazier when you break it down state to state. There are some states that the percentage is really low for actual people who vote. And you could argue even on this that that is a part of the argument in these people. I mean, sorry, these people, this 37%, this 89 million, uh, are not registered to vote just solely because of where they live. And that they don't feel that, whether it's, say a Democrat, someone who would be a potential Democratic voter who lives in a state that is perceived to be a fully Republican leaning state. So they would feel like, well, what's the point in me registering? What's the point? Or say the flip of that, a potential Republican voter who lives in a state, say more like New York or California or something, that, feels like, well, the perception there is completely that it's going to be a Democratic state, so why do I register to vote? The other argument into this also is just solely people moving. They've moved from one place to another, and either they forgot to register or didn't register in time, or whatever the case. There's no telling. Like I said, there's so much nuance. There, a lot of people make the argument that these people are not, like, we don't care about these people, but these people actually need to be cared about, and this is the group of people that need to be activated. Like I said, whether it's because they were too late to register because they moved, or they moved and just, didn't consider registering. Maybe it just wasn't in their plans or their time frame to register. They're too focused on the move or whatever the case. Or like I said, they are in a location that they feel it's completely pointless for them to register because their vote, they feel personally, would not matter. And that is a problem with the Electoral College. That's where I feel the biggest issue when that comes in, is the fact that we are running by an Electoral College. If this was more in a popular vote situation, then people would feel like their vote would more accurately count, and you would have higher registration, because in that case, you literally would be, you would be argued to have a value in the percentage of people that vote, and the percentage of people, in the percentage for someone winning or not. You would feel more valued, where in the Electoral College, it's only valued based on, numbers that are supposed to be representative of a state as a whole, which is inaccurate in itself. If it was broke down more into districts, like your House is, the U.S., the House of Representatives is, it would be a little bit more accurate, but still also a little skewed. But if we went to a completely popular vote, then more people would feel more valued in voting. And I feel like a large part of this 37% that is not registered, or, well, it's actually, 36% that's not registered, would potentially register. And then we would have way more accurate outcomes as far as like understanding the dynamics of our country, and whether it truly, is more conservative or more liberal. And, then you would have also, in the argument for popular voting like mandate when it comes to elections, candidates like Trump, Harris, or whoever would be forced to actually try to campaign, present themselves to all of America. They would have to go to every single state and have rallies in every single state to try to earn your vote in every single state instead of just the 7, 8, 9 states that are considered battleground states because they're so close that they really could literally flip the election, which we've seen from 2016 to 2020 to 2024, these states that have flipped back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But that's solely based in the Electoral College. And that's the reason why they only go to those states most of the time. And that's, we never see them in other states. Where if it was a more popular vote, they would be forced, these candidates would be forced to go to all the states to actually present themselves and talk about what their plans are and everything to try to earn everybody's vote. And it's not just solely based in vibes and feels across the rest of the nation. It's still going to be loosely based in that, but you would have more people actually being engaged in it, plus more people maybe getting more accurate information or better understanding of what somebody represents, because they actually would have to come to your area and present themselves, make their argument, which means you would have a more likelihood of actually hearing what they represent versus just seeing it on whatever biased news media you consume. And so that, it would just be more accurate. So yes, I just wanted to break that down to get a little bit more clarity to, the argument that, Trump won by a landslide, or he had such a mandate, and Harris did horrible, and all this kind of shit. It's way closer than you think. It's way closer just than you think. Not only just in the case of them two, but it's not even close to an argument for those who just didn't vote. There's a larger portion of the people out there that didn't vote than did for each candidate. So anyway, hope that was informational. Am I saying that right? That feels weird. Hopefully that's something that you can take from there, and maybe would give you the if the argument even comes up, which I'm hoping it does, but probably won't. But if the argument comes up for whether it's on a federal level or even on your local state level, to have more of a popular vote style election, or even something on the lines of ranked choice voting or something like that. Those are much better representative, valued types voting systems than our electoral college, and it would help engage that eligible voter who is not registering or not voting, or even is registering but still not voting, to be a little bit more engaged and help the country get a better identification of itself. And I think that's where a lot of our country, a lot of the problem in our country is this misidentification of itself politically, really. It's being misinterpreted or misrepresented. So anyways, thank you very much. And till next time, peace, ClearTalk, I'm out.